I, 35F, recently gave birth to my son about 2 months ago. I've been living with a friend in her apartment. It's pretty cramped in here, but it's definitely a better living arrangement than my parents' house. I'm a single mom. My ex-boyfriend, 38M, is the father of my child, but when I told him I wanted to keep the baby, I gave him the choice to walk away, which he chose to do. He doesn't want to be a part of the child's life. I did demand child support, but the payments would only start coming in once our son was born. The terms of our agreement stated that he'd only be obligated to pay child support after paternity had been established and until the child turned 18. He and I have no other contact apart from him sending the agreed-upon amount every month. Let me give you some background. I used to work in corporate marketing for almost a decade before I decided to pursue my passion and become a freelance photographer last year. Yes, I know it was a risky move at my age, but I had savings and was doing fairly well until the pregnancy complications started. There was no way I could continue working after the 5th month because there were quite a few health issues, and I had to depend on my savings. This is where things started getting complicated. I decided to move out of my rented apartment in downtown Cleveland and asked my parents if I could live with them until my son was born. My parents and I don't really have a great relationship because they never approved of my career change, but they agreed to let me live with them since I was pregnant. Here's the thing, they didn't discuss anything about rent with me, so I naturally assumed I'd be living there for free. It was a far more preferable alternative than having to spend my savings on rent every month when I wasn't working. I lived with them for the first 2 months without any problems. It was actually quite pleasant. I contributed by paying for groceries since I was consuming the most in the house and also helped with the water and electric bills. It wasn't a lot, but I was trying not to be a complete freeloader. But apparently, even that wasn't enough. In the first week of my 7th month, my parents sat me down and told me they didn't want to bring this up because it was embarrassing, but they needed me to pay rent. I was completely taken aback because they hadn't mentioned anything about rent when I first asked to move in. I thought the whole point of me living with them would be that I wouldn't have to pay rent, isn't that what family is for? But they'd assumed I was eventually going to pay to live with them and claimed it hadn't even occurred to them that I might want to live there for free. According to them, they didn't want to talk to me about it initially because it seemed tacky to talk about money. I explained that the only reason I'd moved back in with them was that I couldn't actually afford to pay rent right now without burning through my savings. I needed to save money because my pregnancy wasn't going to be an easy one, and in case of any future medical emergencies, I needed to know I could depend on my savings. Even though I had medical insurance, it never hurts to be double safe, which is why I was being extra financially conscious. I understood they might not want a freeloader in the house, so I made what I thought was a reasonable proposal. I told them that once my son was born and I went back to work, I'd pay them the entire amount in one go, whatever I owed them. They just needed to let me live there for free until I could afford to pay them the rent money. This was a negotiation I couldn't have with other landlords, but since these were my own parents, I expected them to be a little lenient. I definitely intended to pay them as soon as I could afford to. I'm not trying to take advantage of anyone here. But my parents were skeptical, and after some deliberation, they told me they couldn't just let me live there for free. If I wanted to live with them, I needed to pay rent immediately, or I'd have to leave. It felt terrible that my own parents were kicking me out over something like this. I tried to reason with them. I even offered to sign any legal document they wanted, agreeing that I'd pay them as soon as I went back to work or even as soon as the child support payments started coming in. But they weren't willing to budge and told me I could either pay them right then or leave. I tried pleading with them, but nothing worked. Eventually, I had to pack my bags and move in with my friend Alexandra, Alex. She was kind enough to let me live with her even though she herself isn't particularly wealthy. I promised her I wouldn't be in her hair for long, but she told me it didn't matter and made sure I was comfortable. She took really great care of me, even more than my parents did while I was living with them. I'm incredibly grateful for Alex because had it not been for her, I probably would have been in serious trouble. Now that the child support checks are being cashed, I can afford to split the rent and contribute, and once I'm fit enough to go back to work, I'll be looking for a place of my own too. I've been very upset about what my parents did because it wasn't as if either of them were struggling financially and couldn't afford to let me live with them for a while without paying rent. My dad's a senior banker, and my mom works as a marketing director, so they definitely don't lack anything financially. They were just being selfish and, honestly, kind of miserly. That's why I haven't spoken to them since they kicked me out. They did try to talk to me normally even after I'd left, but I haven't responded to their calls or replied to their texts. I just don't have anything to say to them, and I really don't know what they could possibly have to say to me after what happened. Now that my son has finally come into the world, I've been posting about him online, not his face or anything identifiable, and everybody knows I'm a mother now. A lot of my relatives have contacted me to congratulate me, and one of my cousins, James, that's 37M, has even come to visit. When James visited me last week and posted a photo of that on social media, my parents saw it and reached out to ask if I was finally having visitors over. I didn't reply to that text either, so they called me. When I didn't answer, they called repeatedly until I finally picked up. They demanded an explanation for why I wasn't talking to them, so I told them that the way they kicked me out of their house just because I couldn't afford to pay rent for a couple of months was heartless, and I didn't want to speak to them. They got all defensive and said it wasn't fair of me to expect them to just let me live with them without contributing to the cost of living there, which I did. It was little, but I did, and that as an adult, I should understand and respect that. Then they had the audacity to say that I should just move on from it because it's all in the past now, and they want to meet their grandson. I was already pretty upset about them treating this so casually, so when they said they wanted to meet their grandson, I told them that I was an adult, and I was free to make my own decisions. I had decided they weren't going to see their grandson anytime soon, so now they needed to understand and respect that because I was hurt and didn't want to see them. I disconnected the call and tried to ignore them, but they kept texting and insisting that I was overreacting because they thought what they'd done wasn't even that big of a deal. They kept saying that it was all in the past, so I needed to move on, which really got on my nerves because even if it was in the past, I didn't like it back then, and there's no reason for me to be okay with it now. Besides, I get to choose if I want to move on or not, and if I don't, then I'm not going to. Am I being too harsh here? Should I let them meet their grandson? I mean, they're still my parents, but what they did really hurt me, and I'm not sure I'm ready to move past it. Update 1. So I argued with my parents over text for a while before things took an unexpected turn. I was so angry that I went online and typed out a post about how my parents had always disagreed with my career choices, which was why they kicked me out while I was heavily pregnant. I explained how they had misled me about the rent situation, but then I did something I probably shouldn't have. I tagged their coworkers in the post to make sure everyone at their workplaces would see it. It's been a week since I made that post, and even though I took it down after about 3 hours, the damage was done. A couple of people had already seen it and liked it. James, my cousin, called me today and told me that there's a huge drama brewing in our family group chat. Apparently, that's all anyone is talking about now. According to James, my relatives are not just discussing my behavior towards my parents, they're speculating about why my ex left, making nasty comments about me being a single mother, and generally being really judgmental. The theories they're coming up with about my relationship breakdown are particularly cruel. They're saying I must have driven the guy away, and that it's all my fault that my son will grow up without a father because I'm so difficult to be with. What really hurts is that these are people I was actually pretty close with growing up. We were a tight-knit family that would get together at least 3 times a month for dinners and celebrations. These people watched me grow up, and now they're the ones making these horrible comments about me just because I dared to speak up about my parents' behavior. But here's what's really getting to me, my parents are in this group chat too. They don't explicitly say anything bad about me, but they're not defending me either. What's worse is that they occasionally send laughing emojis when someone makes a particularly nasty joke at my expense. How can they participate in this bullying and still expect to be a part of their grandson's life? Alex has been amazing through all of this. She keeps reminding me that family isn't just about blood relations, it's about who actually shows up and supports you when you need them. She's been more family to me in these past months than my entire extended family has been in years. I know I probably shouldn't have tagged their coworkers in that post. That was a step too far. But I'm tired of everyone acting like I'm the unreasonable one here. I was 7 months pregnant, with documented health complications, and my own parents threw me out because I couldn't immediately pay rent they'd never mentioned before. How am I the bad guy in this situation? Update 2. After a lot of thinking, I decided to send my parents a limited apology, not for the content of the post, but specifically for tagging their coworkers in it. That was 4 days ago, and they finally responded today. Their response was brutal. My dad texted back saying, "We're not surprised you took things this far. You've always been a disappointment anyway, so we don't care about the post." I thought that was incredibly harsh, especially after I'd made the effort to apologize and do the right thing. I wanted to make it crystal clear that I was only apologizing for involving their coworkers, not for anything else, because they absolutely deserved to be called out for their behavior. After I sent that clarification, I could see them typing for quite a while, but instead of a text, my dad called me. During that call, he revealed that my post had caused significant workplace drama. My mother had apparently been targeted by several coworkers and even got reprimanded by her boss. He then brought up something from the past that I hadn't included in my post. When I first told them I was leaving my corporate job to pursue photography, they'd said some truly horrible things to me, including that they wished I was never born and hoped I'd get lost and never come back. Dad actually had the nerve to say that I should be grateful he didn't file a defamation lawsuit against me. He said he forgave me because I'm his only daughter. That's when I lost it. I told him that if I had included in my post the things they'd said to me about my career choice, they wouldn't have anyone on their side right now. The conversation devolved into him screaming about how I've never appreciated anything they've done for me, how I threw away a promising career to play with cameras, and how I'm an embarrassment to the family for having a baby out of wedlock. When I tried to point out that they're the ones who abandoned their pregnant daughter in her time of need, he started ranting about how their reputation at work is worth more than my stupid life choices. At this point, I couldn't handle any more of his verbal abuse. I hung up and blocked his number too. I had only blocked my mom's before. The whole conversation just confirmed that they care more about their social standing than their own daughter's well-being. Here's the thing, I actually do feel bad about tagging their coworkers. That was a petty move on my part. But I refuse to feel guilty about exposing their behavior. Parents who would throw their pregnant daughter out on the street over money they never even discussed beforehand deserve to have people know what they did. James just texted me that both my parents are now posting in our family group chat about how ungrateful and vindictive I am. Apparently, they're trying to spin the narrative that they were just trying to teach me financial responsibility, and I responded by trying to ruin their careers. The worst part is, most of our relatives are buying it. I'm just so exhausted by all of this. Alex keeps telling me that I need to focus on my health and my baby, not on what they're saying about me. She's right, of course, but it's hard to ignore when your entire family is painting you as the villain in a situation where you were clearly the victim. Update 3. It's been a week since that explosive phone call with my father, and the situation has taken some unexpected turns. James has been keeping me updated about what's happening in the family group chat, and honestly, I'm shocked at how things have escalated. My parents, who previously just reacted to others' comments, are now actively leading the charge against me. They've started sharing old stories from my teenage years, completely twisted to paint me in the worst possible light. For example, they brought up how I once stayed out past curfew when I was 16, but in their version, I was always sneaking out and being rebellious. They're basically rewriting my entire childhood to justify their recent actions. What's really interesting is how they're suddenly very concerned about my son's future. They've been posting about how they're worried about their grandson being raised by someone who clearly doesn't understand family values and holds grudges. This is rich coming from people who kicked out their pregnant daughter over rent money they never previously mentioned. The family dynamics have shifted dramatically. Aunts and uncles who used to brag about my photography work are now claiming they always knew I was making a mistake leaving my corporate job. They're sharing stories about other photographers they know who failed miserably and ended up in debt. It's like they're trying to retroactively prove my parents were right about everything. James showed me screenshots of a particularly nasty conversation where my mother's sister suggested that my pregnancy was a calculated move to force my ex to marry me, and that's why he left. My parents didn't just allow this speculation, they added fuel to the fire by mentioning how I always made poor life choices. The irony of them discussing poor life choices while publicly trashing their own daughter isn't lost on me. The most disturbing part is how they're using my son in this narrative. They're posting about how they pray he doesn't inherit his mother's stubborn streak, and hope someone teaches him about responsibility since his mother clearly can't. Keep in mind, these are the same people who want to be part of his life. How can they possibly think they have any right to be around him after saying these things? Alex read some of these messages and was absolutely livid. She pointed out something I hadn't noticed. My parents always escalate their attacks right after someone in the family expresses sympathy for my situation. It's like they're actively trying to prevent anyone from taking my side. Yesterday, my cousin Rachel tried to defend me in the group chat, suggesting that maybe kicking out a pregnant woman wasn't the best parenting move. Within minutes, my father shared a long post about how this generation doesn't understand tough love and how they were trying to teach me accountability. Rachel was quickly shut down by other family members who praised my parents for their strength in making such a difficult decision. The most absurd part? They're now claiming they only asked for rent because they were trying to help me learn to budget better before the baby came. This is completely different from what they said when they kicked me out. Back then, it was all about how they couldn't afford to let me stay for free, despite both having six-figure incomes. James says the conversation has shifted from just criticizing me to using me as an example of everything that's wrong with young people today. Apparently, I'm now the cautionary tale they use to warn their own kids about the dangers of following your dreams instead of sticking to a sensible career path. I feel like I'm watching my entire family history being rewritten in real time. It's not just about the current situation anymore, they're retroactively changing every memory, every family event, every decision I've made to fit their narrative of me as the problematic child who finally went too far. Alex suggests I should document all of this for the future, in case they try to gaslight me about what was said. She's probably right, they've already tried to change their story about the rent situation multiple times. Who knows how they'll remember all this in a few years? The most painful part is realizing that the family I thought I had never really existed. These people watched me grow up, celebrated my achievements, and seemed to love me unconditionally. Now I'm seeing that their love and support were conditional all along, conditional on me living life exactly as they thought I should. I'm trying to focus on my son and my recovery, but it's hard when your entire family is actively participating in character assassination. The only silver lining is that this has shown me exactly who I don't want in my son's life. I won't expose him to people who think it's okay to treat family this way, regardless of their blood relation to us. Update 4. Today started as a milestone, my first day back at work as a photographer since giving birth. I had everything planned out. Claire, another close friend of mine, agreed to watch my son while I did a small engagement photo shoot. However, what should have been a positive day turned into another family drama. While I was at the shoot, my parents decided to make an unannounced visit to Alex's apartment. They waited outside for almost an hour, repeatedly texting and calling my blocked number from different phones. I only discovered this after finishing the photo session, when I checked my phone and found a barrage of hostile messages from my mother using her work phone. The messages started relatively calm, "We're here to see our grandson," but quickly escalated to accusations. "How dare you take a newborn to a photography session?" I hadn't, he was safely with Claire, and what kind of mother abandons her baby to play with her camera? Their messages were wildly contradictory, one moment berating me for being an unfit mother, the next pleading about how desperately they wanted to be part of their grandson's life. What really infuriated me was their claim that they had every right to see their grandson and that I was alienating them from their family. They seem to have conveniently forgotten that they're the ones who alienated me when I needed them most. My father even had someone from his bank message me about how family reconciliation is important for the child's well-being. Alex was working from home and witnessed their entire visit through her security camera. She said they kept pacing outside, arguing with each other, and at one point, my mother tried to convince the building's maintenance worker to let them in. Thankfully, the worker refused without tenant permission. Alex didn't interact with them but documented everything in case we need it later. The most disturbing part was a voicemail my mother left, saying they were concerned about the baby's living conditions and threatening to look into their options regarding their grandparental rights. When I told this to Claire, who happens to be a family law paralegal, she assured me they have no legal standing, especially given their recent behavior and the documented evidence of them kicking me out while pregnant. James called to warn me that my parents had posted in the family group chat about their failed attempt to reconcile. They portrayed themselves as heartbroken grandparents who were cruelly denied access to their grandson, conveniently leaving out their unannounced visit and attempts to enter the building. What's really rich is that they're now claiming they're worried about my mental health because I'm obviously still hormonal and not thinking clearly. They've suggested to family members that I might be suffering from postpartum depression and making poor decisions because of it. While mental health is a serious issue, they're clearly using it as a weapon to discredit my legitimate grievances with their behavior. Claire helped me document all their messages and the security footage. She suggested I start keeping a detailed record of all their attempts at contact and any threats they make, however veiled. She's concerned their talk about options and the grandparental rights might escalate into actual legal action, however baseless it might be. The whole situation has made me realize I need to be more proactive about protecting myself and my son. I've started looking for my own apartment, somewhere they don't know about. Alex understands completely. She's worried they might keep showing up and causing scenes, which could cause problems with her landlord. I've also had a long talk with my photography clients about maintaining privacy. I've asked them not to tag locations in any photos I take and to be careful about sharing details about me on social media. Most have been incredibly understanding, especially after I explained the situation in general terms. The scariest part is how my parents seem to be getting more desperate and unpredictable. They've gone from ignoring me during my pregnancy to suddenly claiming they have rights to my child. Their behavior is becoming increasingly erratic. One minute they're calling me an unfit mother, and the next they're saying they just want to be loving grandparents. I've decided to make some major changes to protect my peace and my son's well-being. I'm looking into changing my phone number again, setting up a P.O. box for my photography business, and being more careful about what I share online. Claire has offered to help me research affordable apartments in areas my parents aren't familiar with. Update 5: After weeks of searching, I finally moved into my own apartment last week. It's a small one-bedroom unit in a secure building with camera systems and controlled access. The place is much smaller than what I had before all this started, but it's what I can afford right now, and most importantly, it's ours. Saying goodbye to Alex was harder than I expected. She's been my rock through all of this, and I'll miss our late-night talks, though she probably won't miss my son's 3 a.m. crying sessions. She made me promise to visit often, but only after I've settled into the new place and made sure my parents haven't somehow tracked us down. Speaking of my parents, I've blocked them on every possible platform since their unannounced visit. I changed my phone number and made all my social media accounts private. My photography business now operates through a P.O. box, and I've started using a separate business phone number. Claire helped me set up a LLC for my photography business, which adds another layer of privacy protection. James has been keeping me updated about the family situation, though I've asked him to only tell me about serious concerns. Apparently, my parents have finally stopped their daily rants about me in the family group chat, probably because they've realized it wasn't getting them the sympathy they wanted. Some relatives have actually started questioning their version of events, especially after hearing about their attempt to force their way into Alex's building. The most surprising development came when my aunt, who had previously been one of my harshest critics, reached out privately to apologize. She admitted that seeing my parents' increasingly erratic behavior made her realize they might not have been telling the whole truth about what happened. However, I'm keeping my distance from all relatives right now, even the apologetic ones. I can't risk any information about our new location getting back to my parents. My photography business is slowly picking up again. I've found a wonderful daycare near our new place that offers flexible hours for self-employed parents. The owner understands our situation and has strict protocols about who can pick up children. It's a huge relief to know I can work without constantly worrying about my son's safety. It's strange how life works out sometimes. A few months ago, I thought my world was falling apart when my parents kicked me out. Now, I realize it was actually falling into place. Yes, my apartment is smaller, and yes, I'm still rebuilding my business, but for the first time in my life, I'm truly independent. There's no one judging my choices, no one trying to control my life, and no one making me feel guilty for following my dreams. My son is thriving in our new environment. Without the constant stress and drama, I'm a better mother. I'm creating photo albums for him, documenting our new life together. Someday, when he's older and asks about his grandparents, I'll be able to show him that sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the best outcomes. To those who suggested therapy in my previous posts, I've started seeing a counselor who specializes in family trauma. It's helping me process everything and strengthen my boundaries. She's helped me understand that my parents' behavior isn't about me, it's about their need for control and their inability to accept that I'm an adult capable of making my own choices. The future feels bright now. It might not be the future I imagined when I first found out I was pregnant, but it's better because it's authentically ours. Thank you, Reddit, for all your support throughout this journey. Your advice and encouragement helped me stay strong when I was doubting myself. Special thanks to those who shared their own stories of breaking free from toxic family dynamics. You helped me realize I wasn't alone.